listening to The Big Album Show with Paul Dillon and Dan O'Neill.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of The Big Album Show with me, Paul.
And me, Dan.
Tonight, we are talking about one of the greatest albums of the 1990s. If you were a sentient being in the mid to late 90s, you will have been humming along to the tunes on Jagged Little Pill by Alanis Morissette, which is the feature of this edition of The Big Album Show. It's a defining album of the era. It's a defining album of our career. And indeed, it's a defining point on many people's musical journey. It's at times deeply personal and intimate, occasionally whimsical, and indulge me for a moment, it's occasionally quite ironic in that it deals with very heavy themes, but slides into exuberance and joy at other times. It's poppy, grungy, and always melodic and catchy. It produced 5 singles, transported Alanis Morissette to global superstardom. 27 years on, it still attracts deep affection and maybe just a little bit of nostalgia. Dan, how was it for you returning to the scene of Jagged Little Pill by Alanis 27 years on?
Well, there's no doubt that this is one of the iconic albums of that period. You know, anyone who was around at that time has some kind of memory of the album and listening to the album and watching the videos on MTV Europe if you're in this part of the world around that time.
Yeah.
It still means a lot to so many people, and you can just see in the comments on social media and on message boards and various platforms, anytime that this album is mentioned, people tell deep stories about particular songs on the album and how they affected them. And as you say, there was 5 massive singles on this side of the Atlantic off the album, 6 in the United States, and all of them stand up as quality melody-driven singles with fantastic choruses. And of course, Alanis had the help of Glenn Ballard writing some of the songs on this album, and he was involved in writing songs with Michael Jackson on Thriller, Bad and Dangerous. So he's, you know, a high caliber songwriter. But one of the things that I love about this album, or at least some of the songs on the album, is that you can really hear the rawness of the songs. So I believe that most, if not all, of the vocals were recorded in less than 2 takes. Like Alanis used to go into the studio. She used to write the song there and then. They used to record the song almost straight afterwards, and then she'd drive home at the end of the day listening to the song they'd created. So there is a rawness to this album, but at the same time, when you listen to the album, I think you can kind of, it sounds like an album from the mid-90s. The kind of production of it, the sound of the drums, the just the kind of timbre of the music, it does sound like an album from that period. So while it is kind of raw and so on, it does kind of have a vibe of mid-90s. You know, like there's guitars in it with a kind of a really kind of chorusy effect on them and stuff. So it's interesting, and great musicians on the album as well. Yeah, like you had people like Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, David Navarro from Jane's Addiction, and not on the album, but he played on the Jagged Little Pill tour with Alanis. You had Taylor Hawkins, who went on to be the drummer in Foo Fighters. So Alanis Morissette was surrounded by incredible musicians during this period.
Yeah, I think they managed to do something unique and incredibly special. And she was 21 at the time. She had done, of course, 2 kind of poppy, dancey sort of albums, which had been hits in Canada and nowhere else. And then she does this. And I think the victory, I mean, I agree with absolutely everything you said, but the victory is Alanis alone in that it's her personality
Yeah.
that shines through, her experience and her emotion that shines through each of the tracks, which makes this special. But I think you're absolutely right about that. I think there's something magic in the figures that were around at that time. And you mentioned the production of the record and the songwriting. 10 years after this, she did an acoustic album of Jagged Little Pill, where she re-recorded all the songs acoustically. And I recall that at the time, and I went back and listened to it again when this to prepare for this pod. And I remember thinking at the time, feeling that let down, because I remember thinking, when we get acoustic versions of these songs, they're going to be totally raw, totally pure. But it didn't repeat itself. So there was something special in the recording of it and in the making of it. The genius of this record for me, Dan, is the relationship between Alanis Morissette and the listener. It's how she established that relationship. The songs for me are like a series of deep, intimate exchanges between two people who know each other rather well. The thing that she does is that she often addresses the listener directly, and that establishes that relationship between the fan and the artist, or between the listener and Alanis. So someone I admire very much in the theatre world is Raymond Keane, and he talks about the idea of the clown being in direct conversation with the audience. And what she does here is that she is in direct conversation with the listener. I think that sort of explains why so many people have such a great affinity to this record. Now, I have a lot of examples of this, but I think you can see it really clearly on the first track. All I Really Want. Now, this is a great opener. I think she's got an eye here to maybe Bob Dylan's All I Really Want to Do, which his first track on Another Side, or maybe Joni Mitchell's All I Want, which kicks off the Blue album. But what she does here is just really terrific, Dan. I think, where she says, do I stress you out? My sweater is on backwards and inside out. And you say, how appropriate. So she sets it up as a conversation from the get-go. And later in the song, she says, enough about me. Let's talk about you for a minute. And I think that she creates an intimacy, a connection with the listener. You can hear it again on Mary Jane, which I think is really deeply moving, deeply caring, warm, delicate, incredibly strong, direct, honest. And I think that's the common thread that unites these songs. And I think that's why it's so special for so many people.
I think it's a wonderful point. You can almost imagine Alanis reaching through the stereo, embracing the listener and saying to the listener, it's okay to feel the way you feel. It's okay to feel angry or disappointed or whatever the feeling is in a particular song. And that's what you feel Alanis is doing in her complete and utter honest conversation with the listener. And it's almost like a stream of consciousness sometimes. And like when she brought some of the lyrics to her co-writer and put them in front of him, like in one of the songs she has, she uses the F word in You Oughta Know. And she said, oh, well, maybe we should change that at some point. And he said, well, do you feel that? Is that how you feel? And she said, yeah, well, that is how I feel. And he said, well, let's keep it. And that was the approach she took from then on. And she was so right. And she's so talented in terms of how she manages to convey feelings that a lot of people have, but in her own way and through her own experience. And it was interesting when you mentioned that Alanis had other albums before this that were more kind of dancey, more poppy, more kind of traditional in some senses. And then she's dropped from her initial record label MCA, and she goes and creates Jagged Little Pill. And my hot take of the night, anyway, is that when I
hope you have more than one now, Dan, in fairness.
Yeah. We'll see what I can muster up as we go. But my first hot take of the night is that when I listen to Jagged Little Pill, I hear influences from some well-known singers of that period that we covered in the show before, if you listen back to previous episodes. And who I hear coming through are the likes of Sinead O'Connor, but particularly Dolores O'Riordan, because if you think about the period, this came out in 1995. The Cranberries had just released their two biggest albums in the run-up to this. So I think, like, if you look at Nevermind by Nirvana, there's a kind of a narrative out there that Metallica's Black Album set up the public to be accepting of Metallica's of Nirvana's Nevermind by kind of introducing heavier rock into the mainstream around that period. And I think likewise, what the Cranberries do in their first two albums is kind of like there's been fantastic female singers throughout musical history, so they weren't doing anything completely new. But in this period, Dolores O'Riordan comes along with her incredible kind of honest, strong, powerful female vocals, and she kind of tunes the public's ears to accept that kind of energy again. And Alanis Morissette comes and she adds to that. She with this wonderful album. And when I kind of thought about this, and then I went and I did a bit of research, and it turns out that one of the engineers on the album, Chris Fogel, he actually said in an interview that throughout the recording of this album, they were listening a lot to the Cranberries, and that Alanis was also a massive Sinead O'Connor fan. And I think, Alanis Morissette, Sinead O'Connor, Dolores O'Riordan, three incredible singers of that period, three iconic singers of that period. And I think they were all doing something special, really, really special. And second hot take of the night is that I think Alanis Morissette has been deeply influential on artists since she's been out. I listen to the charts now, and I look at the likes of Olivia Rodrigo.
Yes,
and
that's the one I was thinking.
Music, her album is absolutely
amazing,
fantastic, amazing, really, really good stuff.
And you can hear Alanis in that the conversational style, the stream of consciousness, almost, if that's the correct word. And it's a kind of a slightly there's a kind of a slightly rapping rhythmic style of lyric, of singing, and then of course that confessional style, that's all there. And I think you're absolutely right to reference Sinead O'Connor, and another one, just Tori Amos as well would have been a trailblazer. I think in terms of Joni Mitchell, of course. I mean, when I heard it at the time, Joni Mitchell was the one that I always thought of, and I always heavily associated her with that. But one of the things, Dan, that what you're talking about there is it's quite heavy and quite serious, a lot of what you've been saying there. And I don't disagree with any of it. But there's an other side of this record that's incredibly fun and melodic. And, so she's quite funny. So the song Ironic is quite funny. It's people have had a lot of fun with that song ever since, because the lyrics are funny. And there's exuberance at times, there's joy at times. A song like Head Over Feet, you can hear the joy, you can hear the exuberance, you can hear the fun, you can hear the happiness. The video that goes with that is absolutely brilliant. I mean, the Head Over Feet video is superb. If people haven't seen it, go check it out. It's brilliant. Alanis Morissette is a brilliant actor. You can see her in different things. She's in one of the Sex and the City episodes. There's a cameo part, terrific. She's just a great performer. So in that Head Over Feet video, there she is in the 1990s Adidas tracksuit type thing. She wears a number of them, different colors. She's kind of got a pair of those kind of flares. So it's very 90s. I mean, it's kind of clothes that I wore in the 90s, briefly in fashion. So that's the last time I was in fashion. So I'm quite familiar with it. But it's a serious point I'm making. The serious fun here, the serious joy going on here, as well as anger, as well as deep emotion. There's a lot of exuberance and joy. And even when she does Head Over Feet, which is probably one of my favorite tracks on the album, the video for that is just her talking into the screen more or less, or singing into the screen more or less, but sometimes she sings, sometimes she doesn't sing. And that's the video, and she co-directed it, and it's incredibly effective. It's incredibly emotional, but at times she's kind of smiling and laughing. So there's a whole range of emotions happening here, isn't it? And I just wanted to mention the videos, Dan, because I don't know how you found them, but I mean, I just loved going back over these videos. I just thought that they're all terrific. In 5 singles in this part of the world, 6 in the States, great videos accompanying them. And this was, of course, the era when you needed your heavy rotation on MTV. And she certainly got that. I mean, so much you could say about the videos, but just to reference the ironic video, which again, people will remember, I remember very well, it was on Top 30 Hits, heavy rotation back in the 90s in Ireland. But in that, I think there's 4 different Alanis Morissettes. And there she is driving the car, talking over her head and that's the Waiting for Godot thing. It's the there's so much going on. When I say Waiting for Godot, I mean they're doing nothing, but a hell of a lot is happening. And you can just, that device is just so clever, and she just delivers it so well. Such a charismatic performer. And of course, so for me, what you get with Alanis is you get these great tunes, these great melodies, but you get this raw emotion, but you also get this amazing performer. And here's the thing: was she performing at all? Was it completely real? And that's the thing that sets her apart from so many people of the time. I mean, many of the bands that we love and we like so much, things that we've done on the Big Album Show, you could hardly say they were being honest. In fact, looking like a band, like some of them are being highly, there's huge amounts of whether it be irony. I'm being a bit ironic and dealing with that, but I've done that joke already. But what I'm saying, Dan, is Alanis Morissette packages it up. She plays a straight bat. And I think that sort of emotion connects with the audience. My 3 favorite tracks, for what it's worth, would be Mary Jane, which I've referenced, and then Head Over Feet, and probably One Hand in My Pocket. But it's it's a hard one, or possibly You Learn. I mean, we normally do 3 top tracks, so I'm doing 4, and I have a difficulty saying which of those is my favorite. But they're my favorite tracks. They're my top tracks. How about you, Dan? Do you have some top tracks on the record?
Yeah, like I love all the tracks you've mentioned there. Like imagine having an album with like 5 or 6 quality singles at the level of the singles of this album. Like each one of them, they're those kind of songs that you don't have to be an Alanis Morissette fan to intimately know the song. Like back to Ironic for a moment, like the video was set in a car, but I think most people around our age can remember being in a car in the mid-90s, listening to that song, and someone in the car kind of bopping along to the chorus. Because as you say, while there's great emotion, there's great joy in the music and kind of liberation in the music as well. But my top song of those songs would probably be You Ought to Know. I think it's so visceral. It's so strong. But it's kind of like liberating as well, listening to it. Because that chorus is just fantastic. Alanis is shouting, "You ought to know," at her former lover. It seems, and when you look at Alanis performing this live on YouTube, like you can just see the crowd screaming the words back and feeling the words as they're screaming it. And of course, this is the song that had Dave Navarro and Flea playing music on it. So you have Flea's brilliant musicianship on it. It's just a really, really powerful, strong track. I love it. And like, there's no other track. I can't think of another song out there that actually sounds like it. It kind of stands alone as one of these songs that you say, yeah, that's You Ought to Know, and it sounds original, and it doesn't sound like it's been imitated since. It's kind of one of those songs that just sounds like itself, and it's fantastic.
I think you're absolutely right. I think she's inspired a hell of a lot of people, but she hasn't got very many people who've copied her or managed to copy her. Now, there was Meredith Brooks probably came closest with that song, I'm a bitch. Remember that one? But I mean, there's been a few copycats, but I mean, generally speaking, what she's done is just inspired so many people. And I mean, I think we should come back to a minute, Dan, to our place in music history. You've already started that conversation. But one thing I just wanted to mention was that when we put up that we were doing this pod, we got a really interesting response from people on Twitter. Anne Marie said, this record has never aged, still listen regularly. Kira, my absolute all-time favorite. This one from Susan, I grew up with Alanis, like everything all the way along, right to this day. She resonates deeply. Makes sense because she's just 3 years older than me. And most importantly, What I Really Want became the anthem to my ADHD diagnosis, aged 40 plus. And I mean, there's definitely a huge connection then, I think, between Alanis and the Irish audience. I can recall the 1996 gig she did in the Point as part of Fela. That was put out live on the radio at the time, and you could get the gig afterwards. You recorded them on tapes, and you could buy them in Dublin City Centre in the record shops. So if anyone has got a little tape, you can put it. You'll become get up on YouTube. You get lots of people listening. But I remember when she was doing Ironic, the crowd went completely quiet, and some people in the front were singing, and people were telling them, shut up, be quiet, and again, that just has this connection with the audience. And my take on it, for what it's worth, Dan, is one of the big reasons why she has this big relationship with the Irish audience is the emotion of the record. And I was looking at an interview that she did not too long ago on This Morning in Britain, that show, and she said that when she was young, she wasn't allowed to feel emotion, no fear, no anger, no sadness. And as a result, she felt them all. And that this album, she put that all out there. And you can just imagine in a country like Ireland, coming from the position we have, and, that how that would resonate with people, that release. And for me, that's, what she manages to do, and what she still manages to do. And I want to come back to that, Dan, because I've got a few things to say on what she's been doing since. But that, for me, is the reason that this album was so successful. That connection with the audience, the pure rawness of the emotion, her personality, her honesty, her directness, and the skill the skill in terms of the melodies.
Yeah, like another thing I noticed about Alanis's description of writing and recording this album is something like I found as we're doing the big album show. We're on about 22 or 23 episodes now, and we've talked about many albums. Do listen back if you haven't heard our previous episodes. But trends begin to emerge. That was a good plug, wasn't it? But trends begin to emerge, I feel. And one trend that's emerged throughout all of the various albums we've looked at is that songwriters seem to say that songs almost emerge magically, rather than being written. Now, sometimes that's not the case, but Alanis, when she was talking about this album, she said 80% of the album is original demos. She said the songs pretty much wrote themselves. She said, I don't have much of a say. They feel channeled. And sometimes I don't even remember writing them. And I just think it's this incredible trend that seems to happen, whereby really powerful songwriters, or I'm sure it's the same with poetry or playwriting or any kind of any one of the arts, that these incredible artists seem to get into a state of flow where the music just kind of emerges from the subconscious, and never more so than in this album.
This is gone very, very deep altogether, Dan. I mean, I'm not sure if I can deal with this level of depth. But no, listen, you're absolutely right. And I mean, I think that sometimes the great records, what she manages to do here, and the genius of it is that she manages to tap into something that's almost hard. It's almost hard to explain how she managed to do it. Now, I think it would be true to say that she never quite managed to do it again,
Yeah.
which is, I mean, she certainly has managed to do it consistently with her singles. So, I mean, since this record, I mean, consistently you can hear very, very strong tracks. And some of my favorite Alanis Morissette tracks are not on this record, but she never managed to repeat that, whatever magic ingredient was going on there, whatever was emerging, she never quite managed to repeat that, in my view. But she did manage repeatedly to deliver in terms of her singles, which many of them been just so terrific. So I think after this record, there was a 3-year break, not a 3-year break, because she toured, I think, for 18 months constantly, including not just countries back to back, but at times continents back to back. And Radiohead were briefly with her, and things went so bad they made made OK Computer. But anyway, the point I'm getting at is that the next record was, she went off to India, I think, for a period of 2 months with her mum and her aunts, as you do. And she came back and she recorded Supposed Former Infatuation Junkie. And that record didn't scale the heights of Jagged Little Pill, but it did produce 3 terrific singles. Thank You, of course, being the first one, but also Unsent and So Pure. And I mean, Thank You is just such a beautiful song and such a beautiful video. And she, and since then, you can hear the quality of her work. It's never, as I said, album-wise, she never quite got the success again, but she certainly has it in the singles. I mean, the next album, Under Rug Swept, she had Hands Clean, which is just such a terrific song. Precious Illusions, another terrific song. Then in So-Called Chaos, she had Everything, which sounds a lot like something that could have been on Jagged Little Pill. But just to bring it up to date, her last record, Such Pretty Forks in the Road, the lead single on that was Reasons I Drink. And the video is an AA meeting. But the other big single is Ablaze, which is about her life with her husband and 3 children. That's her most recent record. And I think it was last year during the height of lockdown, she did Ablaze on the Jimmy Fallon show. And I just love this, Dan, that she did it with her daughter in her arms, because obviously they were recording it remotely all over the world. The musicians were in different parts of were in different locations. And there she is with her daughter, and the daughter at times interrupts the song. And when you listen to Ablaze, I listened to it with my own daughter, and she absolutely loved it. She really, really responded to it really, really well. And it's just this consistency in Alanis Morissette's career of consistently being real, for want of a better word, consistently being honest, and consistently bringing her personality and putting it all out there. And I think that, for me, is what's particularly special about her, and which assures her place in rock history.
And I think we owe so much to the likes of Alanis Morissette or Sinead O'Connor or Dolores O'Riordan, because we're lucky now to live in an age where we have fantastic female-led bands like Wet Leg, Snail Mail, Haim, Phoebe Bridgers, Taylor Swift. We mentioned Olivia Rodrigo and so on. But these are these are the heroes of the music world at the moment. And when Alanis was at her height, definitely looking back at that period, particularly in the kind of indie rock space, I feel it was much harder for female artists to break through for various reasons. And I think that was wrong. And I'm glad it's changing. But the fact that Alanis and Sinead and Dolores and Tori Amos and so on, like, really paved the way for the artists we see today, like, we really owe them a debt of gratitude. Because they must have been, they were incredibly strong and talented to break through in that setting. So just big kudos to them. Like, we really, really do owe them a debt of gratitude.
Yeah, I think that's right, Dan. I mean, if you look back, one of the things we're going to be doing this year is looking back at the Britpop era. It's 25 years since 1997, which was the height maybe of the Britpop era, and entirely male dominated. So too the grunge scene. So that's why I think that's absolutely spot on what you say. If I have a reservation about this record, it comes at the end, because I do think that one of the problems in producing an album with so many very good, high quality tracks is that when you put something on a record that's comparatively a bit weaker, things start to look a bit staid. And for me, I think Not the Doctor and Wake Up, they come at the end and they are comparatively weaker tracks. It's just my take. It's just my feeling. I mean, I think the first half of the record is terrific. And then there's a run of really big tunes, and then it just ends slightly. It goes down slightly for me, downhill at the end. But for me, I mean, this is a terrific record. This one has its place in rock history. I think it sold 34 million copies. Yeah. It's a huge seller. It was also one of the last tape sellers. So if you have this on a tape, it's possibly the last record that you bought on a tape, because by 97 actually, big records that were released, they stopped releasing them on tape. So she got in there in 95, 2 years before that. But for me, Dan, it gets 8 out of 10. Great record, place in history assured.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. 8 out of 10 is a really, really good mark, and I think it's well deserved. Like, this isn't an album. It's an album that I had on tape back in the day. It isn't an album.
Was it one of the last tapes you bought?
Probably. Yeah,
that's a good take I had, in fairness, wasn't it?
Yeah, really good. No, definitely. But like the thing about it is, to be honest with the listeners, it's not.
Sorry, go on. Sorry.
No. But it's, to be honest with the listeners, it's not an album I've listened to a great deal since then. And going back to it was fantastic. It really brought back great memories. Like, all of the songs, all of the singles off it are an incredible, iconic, and it really does stand up as an incredibly powerful album. So I think, yeah, definitely 8 out of 10 is well deserved. What were you going to say about the old tapes there, Paul?
I was just going to say, I mean, if I could find a way of tweeting that about it being the last big tape, I could be onto something,
Yeah.
But anyway. To conclude, listen, thank you very much to our listeners for checking out this Big Album Show podcast. If you like what we do, we beg you on our knees, we implore you to please like us on social media if you can, at The Big Album Show, if you want, if you can, no pressure, but do it. At The Big Album Show, like us, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and please do subscribe and give us a little review and leave a few stars, give us a rating, whatever you like. We'd really appreciate any support. And please, if you like the podcast at all, please, we would really appreciate to maybe tell somebody else and share, and we really appreciate that, wouldn't we?
Yeah, and do remember, we have loads of episodes that we've recorded over the past year, and like, the great thing about this show is that, because we're talking about old albums, our shows aren't really time bound, so you can go right back to the start and listen to our first podcast and work your way back. And none of them will sound out of date, because we don't talk about boring things like stressful things anyway, like current affairs and so on this show. We stick to the music. So it's probably a nice bit of relief for people to indulge themselves in that. And we are a community, so do listen along to the albums with us. Do share your hot takes with us. And thank you for listening. We really, really appreciate it. And we certainly get a lot out of recording this podcast, don't we, Paul?
Absolutely, we do. And thanks to everyone for their support.
Slán.
You're listening to The Big Album Show with Paul and Dan. Please remember to subscribe, hit like, and remember to follow us on our social media platforms at The Big Album Show.